And we are back with Jacob Infante. I am Ari Temkin. Welcome into Chicago Draft Room 2026, right here on Second City Gridiron. And of course, in conjunction with the Windy City Gridiron. Great to have you with us here live on YouTube. And of course, here on our Chicago Draft Room podcast. What's up, Jacob? How are you?
I'm doing all right. It's been a busy week, a lot of exciting things going on. So I'm just excited to be here, excited to break it all down.
Yeah, I mean, a really active start to free agency for the Bears. And I think, as we look to the draft, now knowing what positions have been solidified, quote unquote, through free agency, it helps give us a better picture of the draft and the potential in the draft. On the show today, I think we get into free agency. One of the big questions I have is did any of the moves in free agency take the Bears off the board for certain positions? Did it solidify some of these positions enough to where you feel good about not drafting players of those positions? Plus, we'll get into Maxx Crosby and as it looks like Crosby's staying still with the Raiders, is there a move that would make sense for the Bears? Is there a move that you would make, an acquisition? What would you offer the Raiders in order to get Maxx Crosby? All that on the show today. But let's start with, I would say, the biggest signing to date so far for the Bears, which is Coby Bryant. Bryant, he signs. He's a very versatile defensive player. Obviously, is played. Was a Thorpe Award winner at college at corner, then came to the NFL and played more safety where he's been successful, kind of used as a box safety. He's been used as a free safety. He's used as a nickel corner. What do you like about Coby Bryant signing with the Bears?
Yeah, so I think that when you bring in a guy like him, there's a lot to like from a coverage perspective. I mean, obviously, like you mentioned, he had that cornerback experience from his time in Cincinnati. I think it very much shows in what you see with him and what he's been able to accomplish in coverage with the Seahawks. A very efficient playmaker on the ball. I believe it's 7 interceptions within the last 2 years. I mean, he's someone he's got good instincts in coverage. He's aggressive as a tackler. I mean, I think if you compare him to like a Kevin Byard, I think maybe he's a little bit more consistent. I mean, he still has the playmaking ability. I wouldn't say, obviously he has the same like interception production compared to what Byard had this past year, but still, a very high level playmaker, somebody who can, sniff out route assignments and then be able to make a play on the ball. Um, I think he's someone who can move around a lot too. He's got that versatility. He's got that speed. I think he's a better athlete at this juncture than Byard, being a little bit later into his career. So I think that also plays into the prioritization of speed that we keep hearing about from Poles and Ben Johnson. That they want to add to the defense. You want a faster defense. I think you're going younger at the safety position. You're going faster at the safety position, and I think that that's going to be a pretty big add. Uh, I like Brian a lot. I think he's someone where I mean, he's not like a household name necessarily, but he's a quality, above average starter, and I feel pretty good about him being a big addition to Chicago's defense.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think the one thing that probably says it all about Coby Bryant is, he won the Thorpe Award given to the best corner in college football in the same defensive backfield as Sauce Gardner.
Yeah.
So, I mean, not only is that a ridiculously good, group of corners there with Sauce at Cincinnati, and a big reason why they broke through that year as a group of five team and made the college football playoff for the first time ever. But I mean, just goes to show you how good he is. He's in the same defensive backfield with Sauce Gardner. He won the Thorpe Award. Sauce was a top 15 pick. He went, I think, what was it, fourth round, third round? But to me, this is a home run. And, look, the Bears secondary is going to look awfully different, but that shouldn't surprise any of us. This week we see Coby Bryant is added. And meanwhile, Jaquan Brisker, Kevin Byard all signed elsewhere. Nashawn Wright signed elsewhere. And look, with Brisker, I get it. Like, I think Brisker was a lot of fun. He's a heat-seeking missile. Like, he is a true one-trick pony, strong safety. I think he was taking advantage of in coverage, and the fact that he's got this concussion history, including a neurological rehabilitation in 2024 after a really bad concussion, like that's just too big of a risk to take. So Sticking to the safety position in particular, or the secondary, let's go to the theme of the show, which is, all right, so what they've done in free agency so far, what does that do for their draft approach? Do you think that the signing of Coby Bryant means anything in terms of their approach in the draft?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're still going to be pretty aggressive in prioritizing safety in the draft. I think that, you look at it now, like you mentioned, I mean, Brisker's gone now. Byard's gone, CJ Gardner Johnson's gone. Looking at that safety room, you bring it, you retain Elijah Hicks, but at this stage he's a bit more of he's just depth essentially, and then you bring in what was it, Cam Lewis from Buffalo. I mean, that's a more of a depth signing. I mean, those are guys necessarily you prefer not to start. So I think they're still gonna look for a safety. I think maybe having a guy like Bryant in it was a little bit more of a coverage safety than like a downhill tackler type. I think maybe you start to look for someone who's a little bit more physical. You look to someone who's a little bit better of a tackler who fits kind of that traditional strong safety sort of mold. And I mean, obviously, you're going to look for someone who could, make plays on the ball, someone who's going to be fast. But I do think that uh, you're looking more into that strong safety sort of mold. So, like I look like an AJ Halsey or someone from LSU, or someone who's a really thick build. You can really lower the boom as a downhill defender. Zakee Wheatley out of Penn State's another guy I think would fit that mold. And both those guys I think are like round two sort of prospects, late round two, early round three. So to be able to have two picks in that range, I think would be, I mean, it's beneficial for Chicago in this case. Uh, I mean, and who knows? Maybe Dylan Thieneman out of Oregon, if he's available at 25, maybe that becomes a stronger possibility. Or Emmanuel McNeil Warren out of Toledo, maybe that becomes a stronger possibility as well, because both those guys I think would fit that mold.
Yeah, I wanted to reference the tweet you had from last night, basically saying like you think there's a strong possibility if Thinneman is available at 25, the Bears pull the trigger.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot to like with him. And my only question now is he going to be there at 25? Because you have someone who's, you know, has 3 strong years of collegiate production, at Power Four schools. It playing in the Big Ten, 2 years at Purdue, and then 1 year at Oregon. Playing at a very high level. Someone who's as versatile, someone who's as intelligent as he is, to have the ball skills, to be as aggressive as a tackler, and then for him to go out at the combine and run in the 4.3s. I think that it adds validation to what you see on tape. So he's got the testing numbers, he's got the tape, he's got the production, he has the experience. Again, he's another guy you can move him in the slot. You can have him as a deep center field safety. You can have him too high in the box. You can move him all over the place, really. And I think that that would be a lot of fun to have like a player that versatility and then to add that to Bryant, to add that to, I mean, Cam Lewis, who's essentially fitting into this CJ Gardner Johnson sort of, backup jack
Yeah.
of all trades sort of role. You can really disguise a lot of coverages, a lot of different looks with guys like that. So if Thieneman's there at 25, I'd be a fan of that move for sure.
Yeah.
The only question is if he's going to be there. And I have a
Right.
couple other people. You mentioned that the tweet that I posted, I had a couple people, like outside of my Bears bubble, be like, "Hey, like I have a mock to the Cowboys at 12," and I'm like, "Okay, I think that's a little high for him, but I could see it happening." Uh, so you
Yeah.
never know. I mean, we'll see if he ends up falling there, but I think that if he is there at 25, he'd be a strong possibility.
Well, look, I mean, we know the multifaceted versatility of Coby Bryant. It's been well documented since the Bears made the signing about his abilities. I mean, Kyler Gordon has that ability, but I'll believe that his availability will be consistent for the Bears when I see it. So I'm not counting. I'm not going to count him in terms of that. But he's the same mold. And then if you add Thieneman too, like you think about a secondary where like you could really disguise what you're doing with those three guys, because all three of them, I mean, they fit the mold of Dennis Allen in terms of that versatility and and not showing too much in terms of your run versus your pass coverages.
Yeah, no, 100%. So I think that I mean, if he's there at 25, that'd be a good addition for sure. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But if they don't bring him in the round one, I think round two, round three, you're still going to be able to find some solid talent there at safety.
All right, so some of the other moves they've made, they traded for Garrett Bradbury, who maybe doesn't test individually in terms of the Pro Football Focus numbers that highly, but for me, I love the fact that he's a college teammate of Joe Tooney's. So I start there, but Devin Bush added at linebacker, coming off a career year for the Browns. Jedrick Wills, former top 10 pick, comes to the Bears at left tackle as an insurance policy. Amongst these moves, and by the way, my second favorite move beyond Coby Bryant was the signing of the receiver kick returner Khalif Raymond,
Mm.
simply because like their return game was atrocious last year. I mean, Devin Duvernay, their punt return units, like they just did nothing in terms of helping with field position. I think that's going to be a huge difference this year. So he's my second favorite signing. But ultimately, based on all of these additions, Jacob, I mean, do you think that this helps to solidify needs heading into this draft, or are those needs still needs?
I think a lot of the needs are still needs. I think out of the ones you mentioned, though, I'd anticipate that they don't draft an offensive tackle as highly, because I think that the moves they made very much indicate that they have belief in Ozzy Trapillo in the long term. Like once he comes back,
Yeah,
and this is more just, hey, we're looking for a stopgap guy. And then if Trapillo comes back this season, then we're looking for depth. So you bring in Jedrick Wills, you extend Braxton Jones for another year. Assume that that's going to be your competition at left tackle. And then, you mean Theo Benedict in there as well. But I think he's more suited as, a guard in the NFL just because of his lack of, arm length and, there's some instances when he played that lack of range as a blocker can come back to hurt him at times. Uh, but you have Benedict in the mix there. You have Braxton Jones. You have Jedrick Wills. I think they're going to be fine as far as competition for that stopgap starting role. Uh, so I don't anticipate they're going to draft a tackle incredibly early. So I think that that's probably the one position where I feel pretty good, where it's like, all right, you made the moves there to compete for a starting spot in the short term, and then the long term, you kind of tip your cap, be like, all right, we still think Ozzy can be that guy. So I don't anticipate this year tackle is going to be a need. We'll see about 2027. I mean, maybe if Ozzy comes back and doesn't play very well, then it's like, all right, now we need to start to think about something. But 2026, I don't anticipate any big moves in that regard. Uh, Bringing in Garrett Bradbury, like you mentioned too, I think that obviously that helps. And the whole Drew Dalman situation kind of threw everybody for a loop, and it's like, all right, now we need to adjust and make a quick adjustment here to our offseason plan. But I think there's still a solid chance that they end up drafting a center. I really like that round three range for them. I think that's where a lot of good value is going to line up at the center position. Just off of my own evaluations, like I think that you could look at like a Logan Jones out of Iowa, Brian Parker out of Duke, Jake Slaughter out of Florida. I mean, Sam Hecht out of Kansas State feels like someone who, his stock seems to be rising. I know the Bears had representation at
pro
Kansas
day.
State's Pro Day. So I mean, he's clearly on their radar with that being Kansas State's top prospect. Uh, but if they don't take Hecht, where he's trending towards, he might be a second round pick. They have a lot of options, or at least they project to have a lot of options in that round three sort of range at center. So I think that that could be a good move for them to have Bradbury starting in the short term, and then have one of these rookies to develop for a year, and then eventually start them and slot them into the starting lineup. Because I don't think that there are a ton of like there's not like a blue chip level center prospect like a Tyler Linderbaum or a Creed Humphrey or something like that. But I do think that there are a good handful of guys where it's like, all right, in the right situation, which I think playing on the Bears in a Ben Johnson offense alongside Joe Tooney and Jonah Jackson, I think that would be the right situation for one of these rookie centers to come in and succeed. Uh, I think they can make some noise.
Yeah, look, I mean, I agree with you completely. I think left tackle is off the board based on what they've done with Braxton Jones and Wills. And look, I mean, I think they think Jones is going to be the starter, but they like the lotto ticket that is Wills, right? I mean, a former top 10 pick who's got all kinds of talent, who, if he's healthy and can continue to develop, is a guy that could potentially be a long term answer there, even though if they're not looking for it. So it's a very low risk, potential for high reward type where you're not going to really lose anything if he doesn't end up with that potential. With Bradbury, one of the things I've learned in covering the NFL is like it's so much from an offensive line perspective about cohesion. And like, if you've got a guy that started on the same offensive line and the interior, especially at NC State with Joe Tooney, like, so the guy that's next to him, right? I mean, that's huge. So, and like, I remember covering Zach Martin and Travis Frederick for the Cowboys, and it's like those guys had such great chemistry together, and like that matters a ton. Now, Zach Martin individually is one of the great interior offensive linemen we've seen in the NFL in the last decade, but just together with he and Frederick, I just thought there was a cohesion, a chemistry that you just can't, like, it's hard to duplicate. And that's why, like, for me, that's what stood out is it's like these guys know each other. They go back. Like, I think we can look at the individual talent of Bradbury and the questions that are there, which are very much there, but like he's going to be next to a guy that he's very comfortable with. And so if they're like on a string together blocking the way that they need to, that's huge. I also agree it probably shouldn't take them out of drafting a center, and there's a ton available. I think there's been a ton of noise about Sam Hecht. And I just look at two programs that you mentioned in reference there, Iowa and Kansas State. Those are programs that routinely churn out and high-level NFL interior offensive linemen. I mean, think about the Bears, James Daniels from Iowa, Cody Whitehair from K-State, but there's plenty of other examples that aren't exclusive to the Bears. So, I think sometimes when you look at individual players at the offensive line, you almost have to look at the programs and say, like, how are they, what's the track record there? And like with Iowa and Kansas State, those are two programs that, again, routinely develop and churn out high quality interior offensive linemen. So I think you could do a lot worse, third round with the center. What about linebacker? They had Devin Bush. I really liked the addition there, but do you think that takes them out of drafting? We've talked a little bit about Jacob Rodriguez. And then how much do you think that Bush had such a good year based upon the Browns having such a great defensive line? It feels like a linebacker's best friend is a quality defensive line.
Yeah, so I think that it probably takes the Bears out of taking a linebacker. I think that between signing Devin Bush and keeping DeMarco Jackson around for another year, I think that those two and TJ Edwards, I think you'll be fine with your three primary linebackers. I mean, it'll be in two linebacker sets primarily for a majority of the time. But well, and note aside, I'm curious to see if maybe DeMarco Jackson pushes TJ Edwards for a starting spot. So I'd be curious too because they keep talking about wanting to add speed. Edwards is good against the run. He's not very good in coverage, and that's something where DeMarco Jackson hasn't beat at. So is that something they want to prioritize where they want to be more explosive at the second level? Maybe. I don't know. But I do think that between those three, you're pretty set as far as your starting level linebackers go. If you want to run a base 4-3, then you have the talent to do that. If you want to run in the nickel, you have two linebackers who can do that. And then you have like Noah Sewell, Ruben Hippolyte as depth. I think you're fine at linebacker for this year. So, I mean, maybe if I think that they bring in DeMarco Jackson at least at the price they brought him in, it makes it think, okay, he's not a long-term starting option, but he's someone who could push for playing time. So maybe they have concerns about TJ Edwards, and I think that'd be the only reason where they draft a linebacker super early. But I think that with the way the roster is organized right now, I think you have much bigger needs. And you bring up the defensive line too. Like Devin Bush obviously had some, playing behind Myles Garrett, and there's a solid defensive line around that in Cleveland. But obviously, Myles Garrett, wrecking havoc up front. Definitely helps if you're a linebacker, and he's not going to have that same level of talent along the defensive line here in Chicago, at least the way things stand right now. So I think defensive line obviously is still a massive need for Chicago here. I think they're in a good position to where they can address it pretty heavily in the draft. Well, round one, round two, maybe they bring in a guy round three, whatever it might end up being. Uh, I think that the DJ Moore trade definitely helps. Having that extra second round pick and get a potential starting caliber prospect,
Yeah.
I think it makes a world of difference for a defense that still has a handful of needs like this. So you can still get your safety, you can still get your center, and then that also leaves you a first round pick and a second round pick probably to get two defensive linemen. So uh, that's my hope at least is because I'm looking at this defensive line. I'm like, I still have a lot of concerns. They're not,
Well, yeah, and that was going to be my next point. Is I'm extremely concerned about the defensive line. I mean,
yeah,
the Bears were not a very good team at creating pressure, generating pressure. At this point, it's like it's just Montez Sweat and nobody else. It feels like. Um, should they have been more aggressive at edge rusher? And does this now put a premium on if you're going to take an interior lineman, he better be able to rush the passer? Like, does this take McDonald off the board now in your mind?
I think it maybe that's a good point. I think that you're definitely going to want to have a defensive tackle who can rush the passer now in this case because you didn't really add too much in free agency.
And look, Gallimore's there, but I mean, and I remember, Neville Gallimore's a guy that played in the Big 12 when Oklahoma was in the Big 12. And he
Yeah,
was a really good interior rusher, but like, you, that's not a guy that's going to start and get you double digit sacks from the interior, right? Like, he kind of is
yeah,
what he is at this point. Like, I think 3.5 sacks on a season is probably his ceiling. And a guy that's probably part of a rotation, but like that, for that to be the only move you make in free agency, he was kind of a tweener, Gallimore, where he was really
yeah.
successful in college, but like just wasn't big enough, and probably not fast enough to be like a consistent guy that can be a double digit sack guy.
Yeah, no, I'm with you for sure. I think that Gallimore he'll factor into the rotation for sure, and like he'll get a decent amount of playing time, and he's got some burst up the middle, but he's not a 3 down starter necessarily. I think that the way things stand right now, I'd like the Bears to make some sort of move off the edge because I think that there's still some solid options available in free agency. Not to say like, oh, this guy's going to be a long-term starter, but if you bring someone in as like a 1 year pass rushing mercenary, like I'm going through the PFSN NFL free agency tracker, quick plug, you got to
Yeah,
make my
PFSN, let's go get
bosses
there.
happy. Absolutely. So, Jadeveon Clowney's still available, Hassan Reddick's still available, DJ Wanham, Joey Bosa played at a high level last year. You have a handful of decent starting caliber options. Like Clowney, especially, was really good rushing the passer for Dallas, and Joey Bosa. Either one of those two guys, I'd really like. Even if it's just a 1 year deal, like neither at their age, that's not going to be your long term answer at the position. You're not going to find like consistent, long term pass rush there. But say if you bring in one of those guys with Sweat, Dio, Austin Booker, and then you draft a defensive tackle early, you can make something work with that. It's not, I wouldn't say that it's a finished product by any means, but I think that it definitely uh, stops the bleeding a little bit, because I'm with you. I still have major concerns about this defensive line. So I'd feel a lot better if they make at least some sort of decent move in free agency here, because that was one thing I was expecting a little bit more out of them, honestly.
Yeah. And look, I mean, I also get it. Like, it's hard to get value at the defensive end position. And, am I going to pay Jalen Phillips $30 million a year? So
Yeah.
I get it. I totally get it. But I think it begs the obvious question here, which is, okay, so the Maxx Crosby trade reopens, which, by the way, what a ridiculously insane thing to happen. And
Oh my Lord. Yeah.
the deeper you get into this, the more you realize this has happened before. Like I saw that The Ravens had agreed to sign Roberto Garza. Then they didn't pass him. Obviously, it worked out well for the Bears in that situation because Garza came in and became an All-Pro for some really good offensive lines the Bears had. But there's a history here with the Ravens doing it. It's Bush League, and I mean, there should be a penalty for what they're doing. But let's see if it works out for the Bears. Now, the immediate thought here is, oh, this is going to decrease his value because he doesn't, he's come back from meniscus surgery. So what are you offering now? I'm assuming now the Raiders are trying to hang on to him because they don't see they're getting the value that they feel like they should get for him. What would you give up? We've said before, like a first and a second. Are you still there? Would you offer the 25th overall pick? Like, what would you do now with Crosby? And obviously I know Schefter's been out there saying like the Bears are broke and don't have any money, but we all know they can restructure deals they haven't done yet, borrow from tomorrow, which is fine because the salary cap is going to continue to increase and make enough room to sign Maxx Crosby.
Yeah, so I think, you have a little bit more flexibility than I mean, obviously, I know Schefter said he's well connected, that they don't have a ton of money. You definitely have to be aggressive in trying to make some moves and move some money around. But say if you do bring in Crosby, you restructure him right away, you restructure, a couple other players, to lessen the cap hit for this year, you can make it work. Uh, I've been on the record saying, yeah, first and second is what I'd give up for him. I'd be willing to give up the 25th pick for him. Uh, Obviously, the Raiders wanted to get 2 first-round picks out of that. Uh, and getting the number 14 pick out of that obviously was a big win for them, at least, or so they thought. But it's going to be tough for them, at least I think, to match that level of return if they do trade Crosby again, especially now knowing, okay, like, hey, he failed this physical. And, the physicals that's all dependent on teams. So he might fail one team's physical and pass
Right.
another's. So who knows? But I think there is an element of risk attached to that now where it could very slightly decrease his value. I mean, say if the Bears were to go after Crosby and they give up 2 first-round picks for him, I'd be okay with it. Like I think it's a little steep, but at the same time, it's an all-pro edge rusher. Like, you got to do what you got to do to, make an upgrade like that. Uh, but I've remained pretty adamant. It's still a first and second round pick is what I prefer to give up. Like a first rounder this year, second rounder next year, do whatever. Uh, I think that'd be the best course of action. So it's I don't know. Like you said, it is looking like, probably he'll stay with the Raiders. I mean, who knows? Obviously, anything can change as the Raiders try and see if they can replicate that level of value that they got from the Ravens deal and, move that into a different deal. I'm sure they'd consider, but if I'm the Bears, at least that's what I'm offering.
And look, I mean, I think this is where there's a level of disappointment in some of the Bears' decision making this offseason from like I get you're trying to guard for like long-term success. The reality is like now is the time to really overinflate your cap with these kinds of players because like big money is coming for Caleb and very quickly. And so you've got to strike when you have an opportunity or a window here when you have a quarterback on a rookie contract. And I mean, I would assume extension talks will begin, at during next season. His 5th-year option will kick in next year. So, I mean, we're right at the point of the time in which the Bears and Caleb Williams are going to agree to a long-term extension. And now we're talking about 50 plus million a year guaranteed. You're not going to have the money to make a splash play like Maxx Crosby. And that's really, again, like I get trying to protect and guard for the future, but at the same time, like strike now because you have to take these kinds of risks right now when you have a quarterback on a rookie contract.
No, 100%. And I think that, I mean, there's a reason that a lot of people look at, oh, this is the rookie quarterback window as this is our time to compete. And I mean, you're looking at the Patriots now. They made it to the Super Bowl. They didn't win, but they still have so much cap flexibility. They're
Right.
spending a lot of money,
Right.
this
Same
offseason to
deal.
continue to get better. Yeah. And, the big reason is you're not paying Drake May a ton of money. And eventually you're going to be paying Drake May a ton of money, just like
Right.
eventually the Bears are going to be paying Caleb Williams a ton of money. So it definitely shows like you can obviously compete outside of that rookie contract, but it's a lot easier to compete within that rookie contract. And when you have a quarterback playing at a very high level for, relatively cheap compared to what else, the position's making. So I think if there is a time to go all in, it's right now.
Do you buy some of the reports that the Bears offered 2 first-round picks, that the Raiders just took the Ravens offer because it was a better pick?
I mean, I can see it. I can definitely see it. I think that that also might play into why they were a little bit conservative along the defensive line. Like maybe they put their eggs too heavily into that Crosby basket. I don't know for sure. Uh, I could see it though. I could see it. I think that, obviously I'm sure Poles knows too that, there's a competitive window to an extent, and like you're saying, it's easier to compete on a, quarterback's rookie deal. So it makes sense to pounce on a move like Crosby right now. So
Well, and
that wouldn't surprise me. If that were the case, that wouldn't surprise me.
I mean, I guess, and I agree, but I wonder, like, what's changed then? I mean, did the medical piece change? Like, so if they offered 2 firsts and they said no, we'll take the Ravens deal, and the Ravens rescinded, then why would the Bears then have said we're not going to do that anymore based on the medical piece? I mean, look, I quite frankly would have been very disappointed if the Bears traded 2 firsts for Maxx Crosby, but a 1 and a second, I wouldn't. The 25th overall pick. So for me, it comes down to, do the Bears basically take back their offer if that was the case? And how close can they get now to getting him? Because again, like the addition of Maxx Crosby solves a lot of problems. And there's nobody you can get at 25 that will be as helpful as Maxx Crosby today would be. So trading 25 for me makes a ton of sense, especially based on what we just talked about. I guess I'm just confused as to where the Bears really stood in terms of the negotiations with with the Raiders.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm curious too. Like, I think that this whole Ravens situation it throws a lot of questions into the mix from like an outside observer perspective. It's like, okay, did the Bears have this same opinion on Crosby's medicals as Baltimore did, and they're still willing to pay first round picks? Like, what's their mentality going into all that? It's kind of tough to tell right now, but I think that like you said, it makes sense to offer up the 25th pick because, like you said, nobody that they draft is going to make as immediate of an impact as Crosby would if they traded for him. So, uh, I mean, we'll see. Like I've set myself up mentally for the thought that he's going to stay with the Raiders.
Same here.
I'm not getting my hopes up, unfortunately. But at the very least, it's worth reconsidering and, throwing some interest back out there and be like, hey, uh, all right, now that things have changed, where do we stand on this? That whole deal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to me, like after a week of free agency, 2 weeks, whatever it is, no, a week. Man, like I am extremely concerned about the defensive line. It was like I would say going into last offseason, the Bears had major fix needs for fixes at offensive and defensive line. Obviously, they did that last year, and to a degree, they've got to do it again this year. But their defensive line going into last year was going to be bad. It was bad. It remains bad. It's like, at what point? I mean, and maybe it's just the entire draft philosophy. But like, it in a world in which we just watched 2 Super Bowl teams absolutely maul teams up front on defense, it's just crazy to me the Bears have not zeroed in on trying to fix their most glaring weakness. And like maybe, the feeling is, well, Deo will be back this year healthy. And like that is just not an assurance to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and you bring that up too, like looking at both the teams that made it to the Super Bowl. I mean, obviously they drafted defensive linemen, but they also signed defensive linemen too. Where I mean, especially the Patriots, like they brought in Milton
Yes.
Williams, they brought in Harold Landry, they drafted but extended Christian Barmore, they signed Caleb Chase on, and the Seahawks too. They drafted a lot of their guys, but they also traded for Leonard Williams. They signed DeMarcus Lawrence. So it's investment in both ends too. So,
Yes.
obviously you want to draft in the trenches and build up that defensive line. And I think that's what the Bears are aiming for right now. But I'll admit I am a little surprised, maybe disappointed that I thought they'd do a little bit more to their defensive line in free agency thus far. I know that you have a lot of different, openings to fill. Obviously, they had, a decent amount of their secondary leave, and you got to make sure you have enough money for that. But still, like I still wish that they were maybe a little bit more aggressive along the defensive line.
So okay, so I think we've been through 25, right? Like I think there's a chance on Thieneman. You and I both agree, like Peter Woods, if he's there, he'd be great.
Yeah.
It feels like edge rush in that spot, you're kind of in no man's land where like the better value will probably be in round 2 for the guys that are not at the top of the edge rushing class. Who are some names of guys that maybe you think could be available to the Bears from an edge rusher perspective in rounds 2 and 3?
Yeah, so looking at those 2 second-round picks they have like near the end of round 2, I think there's a decent chance you can get some solid value. Derek Moore out of Michigan, somebody that I look at where he's got the size, the speed, and the power. I came away. I keep saying like I watched him in 2024. I'm like, okay, this guy's fast, but I think he really turned it on in terms of the play strength. Like maybe he had the raw power to begin with, but I think that he really did a better job of converting speed to power and playing with better play strength in 2025 for Michigan. Malachi Lawrence out of UCF is somebody. He's got tools for days. Long arms, explosive, prototypical size for the edge rusher position, high motor type of guy. Denied Dennis Sutton out of Penn State is someone where he's got size and power, and he's a pretty good athlete as well. He's someone who would fit into the kind of the Dennis Allen mold of defensive lineman, where like an oversized type of guy. And then Gabe Yakus too is somebody out of Illinois where I've had a lot of people, talking about him. I mean, obviously because he plays in Illinois, but he's someone to where I think maybe he doesn't have like the athletic upside as some of the other guys that I mentioned, but I think he's a little bit more refined. Like he's got a deeper pass rushing arsenal, better spatial awareness against the run, and he's got really good power too. And I hear a lot from like these analysts and coaches and scouts that I respect where it's like you want to have a defensive lineman who can win with power above all else. Like, it's nice to have a speed rusher, but you're more likely to get a starter out of a power rusher. And the good thing for the Bears is I think they could get a lot of solid, strong defensive ends. Like all those guys are, I want to say 250 and above. Uh, and you can see it in the way that they play. And I mean, if you want to go more for, athleticism, you have a handful of guys who can go in that regard. If you want to go for, more like polished, deeper arsenal, you could go with Yakis or something like that, or hope that maybe a Zion Young out of Missouri falls.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think he'd fall that late into round 2, but say maybe you trade down from
Both.
25 and you take someone like that, then, who knows?
Yeah, that's a great call. Or maybe you can move up in the second round by packaging both picks, to
Yeah.
draft a guy like that, which I wouldn't be opposed to. If you're watching this right now on YouTube, I've got this headline scrolling across the bottom. Can the Bears improve their defensive line enough for the draft alone? And I think that's kind of the crux of what we're talking about here. Like, look at Seattle, look at what the Patriots did. And I think it's foolish for the Bears to think that they can improve their defensive line enough through the draft alone. There's obviously a lot of like it takes guys sometimes a year or two to develop into a pass rusher. The Bears have to dramatically improve their defensive line. Like I know that they're really good on offense, but and they took the football away. Chances are they're not going to be that explosive in creating turnovers next year. It's just like one of those stats, and I know you know this, Jacob. Like that tends to even out year over year. Now maybe they pick the right guys that are ball hawking corners and whatnot, but it just feels like a more sustainable path towards being more consistent on defense is a pass rush. And the Bears they just were not good enough last year there. And again, like going into last year, I thought the last offseason, offensive line, defensive line, like they need to improve and dramatically. They did on offensive line, and now here we are a year and a half later, and it's like, have you done enough on defense? And I don't think you can do it through the draft alone. Now, granted, again, I'm not signing Jalen Phillips for what he signed for. I'm not signing, some of these other guys for what they signed for relative to their production. So maybe they're waiting for the second wave of defensive ends and waiting to see what the market looks like for Clowney and Bosa and Chason or whoever else. But I'd love to see the Bears sign a couple of edge rushers in free agency, in addition to really making a strategy of theirs to be heavy into drafting defensive line in this draft.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point you bring up too. With you're looking at defensive sustainability, where defensive line is typically much more sustainable than relying on turnovers,
Right.
because you could, you can trend towards the top of turnovers pretty consistently, but realistically, Kevin Byard isn't going to have 7 interceptions every year.
Sean Wright. Yeah.
Nashawn Wright's not going to have 5 interceptions every year. So that's something you can't rely on as heavily. Like maybe you're going to have guys now who can make plays on the ball, and you can still rank relatively high in terms of creating turnovers. But I think that, like for the secondary, I think completion percentage and passer rating allowed might be it's more reliable than just purely looking at the interceptions. Like Nashawn Wright had a ton of interceptions, but he also allowed a ton of big plays.
Yeah. The Bears
So
basically either gave up a touchdown or intercepted a pass.
literally, yeah. Like
every drive ended either with a touchdown, field goal, or interception.
absolutely. I mean, it was incredibly boom or bust.
Yeah.
So I mean, and that's why, to an extent, I'm not surprised that there's such a massive secondary overall. I was expecting maybe they'd bring back at least one of the guys who departed, but it is what it is. I get why they did what they did.
Yeah.
At least on that end. But the defensive line, I agree. I think that's gonna that's where you'll see your consistent, sustained, high level of play. And right now, it's basically the exact same. Like I think Neville Gallimore is an upgrade over Andrew Billings, but
Yeah.
what else? I mean, you brought in Contavious Street to compete for a roster spot. Like that's it. That's all you've done. You still have the same weaknesses along the defensive line. You don't have like a true 3-down impact player at defensive tackle. You don't have like that true reliable starter at edge alongside Montez Sweat right now. So, yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I'm hoping that they make some sort of move in free agency in like this second wave here to add an edge rusher, because I mean, I think we're both in agreement here. Like, you can't build that defensive line solely through the draft.
Yeah. All right. So hierarchy of positions in the draft. I think it's pretty obvious. You and I agree. Like defensive end, defensive line, like DT, DE. Right. That's line one, and maybe even priority number 2. Where else? Like, what other positions now do you think are part of that hierarchy? If we're looking at the most important positions to address in this draft, we know they're going to take best player available, but let's say in a world in which they've got to zero in on specific position groups, like beyond defensive line, which is priority number 1. How else would you hierarchy? What would be your hierarchy of positions right now?
Yeah, so I mean, defensive tackle and defensive end, like that's clearly like the tier 1 of needs. Those are pretty big right now. I put safety in as number 3. I think that, I mean, obviously you have Coby Bryant now. That's a big money signing, but you need another guy alongside him. So I'm anticipating that one of their first 3 picks, I think, is going to end up being a safety. Uh, in an ideal world, it's D line safety, or D line safety D line, whatever that ends up looking like.
And do you think, Jacob, that needs to be like a true strong safety? Do you think they can, do they need somebody that's good in cover? Like, where do you see them going with safety beyond, Coby?
Yeah, so I mean, I look at least with last year, you had a true like center fielder type of rangy traditional free safety in Byard, and then you had someone like Brisker who, yeah, I mean, yeah, he can make plays in coverage, but his value comes in his versatility and his
Upper.
physicality.
Yeah.
So I mean, maybe this go around, maybe you do want to have someone who can make a little bit more of a splash in making plays on the ball, but I think you still need that physical tone setter at strong safety. So I think you need someone who's not going to be a liability as a tackler. So I think you're probably more the traditional strong safety you're looking at there. But I mean, again, you can go for maybe someone who's like somewhere in the middle to where
Right.
they can make plays on the ball, but they're not a total liability, as a tackler. So that's where I think like a Thieneman would come in, like a Kamari Ramsey out of USC in round two,
Mm.
uh, where it's like they're not like traditional, just set in stone like strong safety stereotypes. Uh, they can hit. They can hit, but they also bring up maybe a little bit more versatility as in coverage as well.
Okay, so defensive line, defensive tackle, defensive end, safety, top three. Any other groups part of this hierarchy?
I'd say that's a pretty clear top three for me.
Yeah, agreed.
And then and
What about
that's what
corner?
I think corner you start to get into like that that next tier down. I think center stands out as number four to me. I mean for the reasons we mentioned, like I think Bradbury's a solid like 1 year type of guy, but you're gonna want to draft someone. I feel like, and then that's where excuse me. That's where maybe you want to bring in corner. In one of some of those middle rounds. Maybe you want to bring in another receiver. I'm with you in that I like Khalif Raymond. I think maybe they could use one more guy's depth underneath that, so where you have uh, Roman Luther in the Bears wide receiver room, and then you have Khalif Raymond and Jade Walker. Uh, I wouldn't be surprised, bring in like just a mid round guy with like that, like a fourth round pick or something like that. I'd be cool with. Uh, So that next tier down, I'm looking center, corner, and receiver. So I don't know where you are on that, but that's just the way that I evaluate it right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I do wonder, and like, there's some, I think if you're looking for a corner or the profile of a corner, the Bears might draft. I mean, just look for the tall corners. There's a kid that played at Arizona that transferred to Washington. That's the 6'4" Trey Stukes, who I like a lot, and that it feels like that guy's like perfectly made for Dennis Allen's defense. But there's certainly some physical corners with size in this draft. Um, I don't know. I mean, do you think that in losing who they've lost at corner and what they bring back, that they're fine to not address corner in the draft?
I mean, I don't think it'd be the end of the world if they didn't draft a corner. I think that I mean, the way you're looking at it right now, it's going to be Jalen, Tyreek Stevenson, Kyler Gordon. That's the same group you were looking at to start the season before everybody got hurt.
Right.
So I'm fine with that. I mean, that's not a bad cornerback group. I think eventually you're going to have to find a long-term replacement for Stevenson there. Uh, but in the short term, I'm fine with starting him at the end of the day, just because you can't fix everything. So,
Right.
but if you do get to that point though, in like round three or round four, to where you see some of that value, like a trade in Stukes, Tacario Davis being another one of those,
Yep.
former Arizona guys, go, and he went over to Washington though. I think, and Will Lee out of Texas A&M, another one of those big-bodied long corners. Like they're, like you said, that's kind of the archetype that Dennis Allen likes at the position. So if you have the opportunity to get someone like that, I mean, it's worth considering. And I know, like, you have Terrell Smith coming off the bench, coming off of injury. You figure to have Zay Frazier coming back. I mean, he missed, his rookie year, with the personal reasons, you can only speculate so much as to what that is. You can't really say one way or the other. And then Josh Blackwell as like your, backup nickel special teams extraordinaire. I'm fine with that as depth. I think, uh, I mean, there are questions with Smith coming off the injury and Frazier, what's his availability going to look like? So I could definitely see them drafting a corner, maybe getting ahead of what's expected to be a 2027 need, and then just, like being aggressive and addressing it now. But if they don't go corner, I don't think it would be the end of the world.
So, defensive end, defensive tackle, safety, center, wide receiver in your mind.
Yeah.
Who
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I'd say, at least for right now, at least.
and you're looking for like a Zacchaeus replacement at wide receiver?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, looking at the depth you have, at least I'm assuming Raymond is going to be the wide receiver three. Uh, so as far as the backups go, I mean, you're going to want someone who's going to be valuable on special teams, obviously. You have size in Jade Walker. So I think Zacchaeus replacement would probably be ideal. One of those, like, more of like a true speed threat. Uh, Maybe a little bit undersized, but somebody who can, make plays in the open field, someone who's got return value potentially, or at least can make plays in punt coverage and kickoff coverage or something like that. So maybe it doesn't have to be someone as small as Zacchaeus or like a true slot like Zacchaeus, but at least someone who's got speed who can, come in as like a gadget player every once in a while and then also, make plays down the field in coverage on special teams. I think that'd be a good addition. Uh, I mean, they have a decent amount of needs still, and I don't think they're going to be able to address all of them like super, solid, properly. But at the same time, like I think that you're still looking at the an opportunity in like that kind of day three kind of range. You could be able to get some guys maybe with one of the two seventh round picks you have. Even if it's someone who's not going to be making consistent plays on offense, just someone who can crack the 53-man roster and play on special teams. I'd be fine with that.
Who are some of your kind of like late potential wide receivers that you have?
So I kind of like in like that seventh round. There's Caden Weegan out of Iowa, where almost primarily because of what he can do as a returner. I mean, he's a special returner. Several touchdowns. I know he won the Jet Award twice as the best best return specialist in college football during his time at Iowa. Someone impressive agility, impressive full field vision. Runs really fast. Even if his combine wasn't out of this world, I trust the tape with him and his ability to look through these open running lanes and exploit them and accelerate through them as a returner is something special. Uh, Other guys late, I mean, I like Eli Heidenreich out of Navy. He worked out with the running backs at the combine. I actually see him as a bit more of like a slot receiver, but he's someone Navy just lined him up everywhere. He was a running back, fullback, receiver, tight end. Like he played the H back. He played everywhere. Uh, and that versatility really helps. And I think it speaks to his football IQ. Uh, Great hands. He's, an intelligent route runner, good speed. Uh, the question is, where are you going to play him? But he's someone, at least as a gadget piece, that I really like. Uh, Another guy too, Kendrick Law out of Kentucky. I think that's another guy who, fits kind of that undersized mold, but he's really athletic. He's explosive, twitchy as a route runner, really good after the catch, and not the most, physical. He's not the guy who's going to win, above the rim on those 50-50 balls, but I think he's someone who can, he can win underneath, he can win out in space. And it's, worth a shot taking. If he's there in round 7, I think he's someone that I'd be interested in too.
I mean, there was a good 24 hours where I thought the Bears were about to make a trade for Jordan Addison after Addison posted a picture of the Matt Forte jersey.
Yeah, and it's like, oh shoot, what's Poles cooking up now? Yeah.
Right. Caleb's former teammate, a guy that, I mean, he can patrol the slot. He's pretty good. Yeah, I don't know what it would take, and I'm not going to give up 25 for Jordan Addison, but my God, that would be very exciting. And I think for you zeroed in on it. Like the Bears' return game was pretty atrocious last year. Like it was basically like Devin Duvernay. His best ability is not fumbling. Like way to go. Like you're not going to get his field position, but you're not going to fumble. I'd love to see more upside, in terms of the return game. So I'm with you. Like if you could find a guy late that gives you some upside as a returner, that to me means a ton, especially because like Raymond was added for that reason, I think. But what about your kick return game? It feels like that's more punt return for Raymond. So
Yeah.
if they could invest in somebody from a kick return standpoint that has more upside than Devin Duvernay, I'm cool with that. Like Duvernay's great, he doesn't fumble, awesome. But like in terms of advancing the football, it felt like the Bears and Duvernay specifically would take the ball out of the end zone and not get it to the 25 pretty routinely.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think that that's where someone like, like Weegin out of Iowa, I think would be, a fun addition to where he's, really unproven as as a receiver. Iowa just didn't use him in that regard, but he's, an incredible return specialist. He's someone who's shown promise
Yeah.
on offense. He looked really good at the Shrine Bowl by all accounts too, as far as, showing that separation in one-on-one drills. And I know if there's one thing Bears fans love, it's localish schools seeing their guys get drafted. I swear every year if they draft someone from Illinois or Iowa, Indiana,
Yep.
Notre Dame, it's all, everyone's always losing their minds. Everyone's so excited about it. A lot of people were excited about the Tory Taylor, like I think like that Iowa fan base in particular, they're very passionate about their players. Uh, I'm a Missouri guy, which you'd figure it's not too far away, but I feel like I'm very much on an island where I'm pushing for these guys. Like I pushed for Luther Burden. I loved him coming out. I'm talking about Kevin Coleman as like a early day 3 pick, the receiver there now. I don't hear a ton, but Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Notre Dame, those schools in particular, they go hard for their prospects. Uh,
Yeah.
and at least at receiver this year, I think Weegin would really fit that mold and would really make a lot of Iowa fans out there really happy.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the double of that would be Josh Kreutz.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, he's got to end up on the Bears. It's the Illinois and the Olin connection. It's like
Absolutely,
what
yeah.
was
Like
he?
it makes too much sense.
Yeah. Is he a center?
Yeah, yeah. So I'll admit I don't have a grade on him. I feel like I kind of have to watch him now, like out of necessity, because it's like okay, the Bears, it's Olin Kreutz's kid. Like they'll probably gonna try and sign him,
Right.
as an undrafted free agent or something. So I don't have notes on him or anything, but that's definitely something where out of necessity because of the last name, I'm probably gonna have to at some point.
Yep. All right. Last thing on the show today, and we appreciate everybody joining us here live on YouTube. Usually we're live Thursday nights. I'm traveling this week for the Big 12 basketball tournament in Kansas City, so we did it on Friday morning this week. Next week I'm traveling as well, but I'll be in Chicago next week, so maybe we can figure out when we're going to do it as
Oh
well.
yeah.
But did this free agency week 1 change your mock at all, or any other mock drafts that you've seen? Do you have a kind of an updated first round look based on free agency, or is it still Peter Woods or bust, or Peter Woods or Dylan Thieneman and or bust?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm not looking linebacker as early. I mean, I
Yeah.
think I have to go back and check because, so many mock drafts over the course of, the year. But I think, before they signed Devin Bush, I was looking at linebacker maybe in round 2 or round 3, something like that. I was big on Kyle Lewis out of Pittsburgh as, one of those guys potentially with his coverage value, but uh I think, obviously, like we touched on, defensive line should still be the priority early. If you get the chance to go get a safety, then you do that as well. Uh, I think, you're taking out tackle probably because of bringing back Braxton and signing Jedrick Wills. But center's now in the mix as well. Safety still heavily in the mix. I think a lot of the mock draft's still going to be the same for the most part, especially in those early rounds. I'm curious now at defensive tackle when you look at like Caleb Banks, where it came
Yeah.
out recently. So it came out recently. So he broke his foot again
Ugh.
at the combine, and it's such a shame because he's such a talented player, such a talented athlete. But now he's got 2 broken feet. I don't know if it was. I think it might have probably been the same one. I
Same
don't
one.
remember. I don't. But within the span of a year. Like that's brutal. You can't take him in round 1 now. Like maybe he's still on the board in round 2, but you can't rely on that in round 1. So I think that impacts things a little bit as well. But yeah, Peter Woods is still my top guy. Dylan Thieneman's in the mix there. Maybe like a Kristen Miller, Katie McDonald still, but yeah, still heavily defensive line though.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and again, kind of the theme of today's show is, did free agency change much about the draft? I think you and I would agree. And you mentioned this, linebacker, maybe the only position that now has been deprioritized and especially given that defensive line has been heavily prioritized. And look, I mean, look, there's Shamar Turner, right? Like there's Dio, like there's guys we haven't talked about, but yet it feels like there's just a lot of like hope and prayers for some of these guys that they're going to come back and healthy and be good. And like that, for me, the NFL offseason is always funny because all the question marks in the offseason turn to optimism.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like you have to evaluate how a team has improved based on like the facts and what we know. And there's a lot we don't know, but like not every question is answered affirmatively, like not every hole is filled affirmatively. So I think like we have to recognize that, like, if you look at like, what do we know about how they built the roster so far and what are like the potential, like, yeah, like things could work out for Shamar Turner and and some of these other guys, but like, we don't know that. And the chances of all of those things happening positively are not going to happen. Like they're very low to actually happening.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I love the way you put that, especially. It's like all the question marks turn to optimism of, oh, maybe, Booker will be a 3-down guy.
Right,
Maybe Dio
right.
will bounce back, or maybe he's motivated now. So it's an interesting time of year for sure. Sometimes those question marks do come true and they end up,
Right.
they end, sometimes they end up working out, but other times, they're question marks for a reason and and it all falls flat. So who knows? I'd rather err on the side of caution though. So I'm hoping that they really make some moves in the draft on defensive line, especially.
Yeah. All right. Make sure to follow Jacob on Twitter and check out his great work at Windy City Gridiron at Jacob Infante 24. You can follow me on Twitter at RE Sports. Make sure to like and subscribe to the Second City Gridiron podcast, and of course the YouTube channel for all the great shows that you can catch as a part of Second City Gridiron. And of course, make sure to like and comment on all of the live streams and the podcasts. If you missed this live, make sure to check us out. Give us some comments over on our podcast page. But for Jacob Infante, I'm Ari Temkin. We're back next week with the Chicago Draft Room. But for now, we're out. Peace.